Hi, I'm Kati Tovah. I'm an autistic fundamentalism survivor and a convert to Judaism. I first aired my discussion on the 1993 film Swing Kids in July of 2024. In light of the escalating political unrest, I am re-releasing that original video. Swing Kids is an important film that depicts the impacts of extremism and fascism on ordinary German citizens and vulnerable populations like people with disabilities. Please share this video far and wide. Thank you.
Hi, shalom. This video is a discussion on a Holocaust film, and there will be mentions of hate crimes and disability-related discrimination. Viewer discretion is advised. Also, use of outdated disability language is for discussion purposes only and does not reflect my own views. All right, so in this video, I will be unpacking the 1993 film Swing Kids. If you plan on watching the film, please be advised it really should be rated R, not PG-13. I will put the link to the content advisory down below. Now, I've seen a lot of material that focuses on the broader events of the Holocaust, and that's definitely a good place to start. But it is imperative that we don't end there, especially in the current political climate. Cults of any kind are made up of human beings, and no one wakes up one day and decides out of the blue that they're going to join a cult or become an extremist. It starts with a decent person with a very legitimate problem. In my case, my problem was trauma from growing up with undiagnosed autism back in the 90s. Now, this film takes place in the 1930s, so this was back when everything was starting to heat up. They were only just starting construction of the concentration camps. It's important to understand that the genocide did not start with the concentration camps. It started with othering Jews and other minority demographics who were seen as different, and as often happens, different was regarded as bad. It's also important to understand that anti-Semitism did not start with the Holocaust. I got the opportunity to go to the Holocaust Museum in DC when I was a teenager. If you ever have the opportunity to go, I highly recommend it. I will post the link to their website down below. And the first thing you do when you go in there is you watch a short film about the history of anti-Semitism. It goes way back to like biblical times. Stereotypes develop when people take one nugget of historical fact and distort it. Today, many people still believe the idea that all Jews are wealthy. I wish. Centuries ago, Jews did work as moneylenders, etc., because many Christians felt like those tasks were beneath them. And Martin Luther is well known as the father of Protestantism and also had some anti-Semitic views, which are condemned by mainstream Protestant Christians today. All right, so now we're going to get into the story. The film follows three teenagers, Peter, Thomas, and Arvid. The characters' love of jazz and swing music is the central part of the plot. Swing music was one of the many things the Nazis banned because, many jazz musicians were black or Jewish, and contraband records were smuggled in to the country and given fake labels. Now, obviously, the Jews and other minority populations suffered the most, but the crumbling economy affected a lot of average non-Jewish citizens. I'm a fourth generation German American, and on my mom's side, I have ancestors who were lucky enough to come to the US between the wars. I exist because my ancestors were able to get visas. even if not everyone knew where the Nazi regime was headed, it was obvious that things were not great. Okay, back to the story. So all three of these boys are German citizens, but they are affected by the Nazi regime in vastly different ways. Thomas is unaffected by the situation for the most part. There are some scenes in his family's home, and we can see that they're quite well off. In other words, Thomas is in a position of privilege that the other two characters don't have. Now let's look at the other two characters. We will start with Arvid. He is physically disabled. We don't really know what happened, but he has something that affects the way he walks. And not surprisingly, his mental health deteriorates as the film goes on due to all the prejudice against people with disabilities. In other words, his problem is the worsening ableism. We'll be coming back to that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Peter Muller. His father, Mr. Muller, is deceased. He's been arrested and deported by the Nazis about 6 years before the story began. He had been working at a university and spoke publicly against the atrocities, especially the removal of Jewish professors from universities. So he was arrested as a CO, conscientious objector. The other term used for that was political prisoner. So he didn't agree with what the Nazis were doing, and they got wind of it. Peter was about 10 or so when his father was arrested and deported, so all he really understood was that the Jews were somehow connected to his father being taken away. Mrs. Muller then had to manage single parenting and entering the workforce, obviously for a much smaller income than her husband had earned. Peter is working a part-time job on top of high school to help support the family, and Mrs. Muller isn't exactly on board with the Third Reich, but she also doesn't really have the brain space to think about politics because she's in survival mode. So the Muller's problem is Germany's economy being in complete shambles. Mrs. Muller is working a low-paying job while raising her children and caring for her elderly mother. The next character I want to talk about is Herr Knopp. FYI, Herr is not his first name. It's basically the German equivalent of Mr. And Herr Knopp explains to Peter why he joined Nazism. He explained that his dad had left when he was a kid, so he went through adolescence without a father figure, just like Peter. However hard it might be to be a single parent today, back then it was 1,000 times harder. Herr Knopp tells Peter about the first time he heard Hitler speak. He says, "I felt like he was speaking directly to me." I reiterate, it didn't start with the hateful ideology. It started out with Herr Knopp as a young boy trying to solve a legitimate problem in good faith. Herr Knopp becomes romantically interested in Mrs. Muller and befriends the rest of her family. You can tell he's really sympathetic about the loss of Mr. Muller. I want to stop here for a minute to point something out. He is very clearly not a psychopath. Psychopaths are literally incapable of having any degree of empathy. And Herr Knopp has very obviously been radicalized, but he's not a psychopath. Most people who join cults are not psychopaths. They are ordinary people with good qualities who are trying to meet perfectly legitimate needs. I cannot emphasize that enough. I've mentioned in a couple other videos that the Nazis followed the American model of white supremacist indoctrination. America did not get the idea from Germany. Germany got the idea from us. Boys had the Hitlerjugend or Hitler Youth. By the way, I'm not pronouncing that wrong. In German, J is pronounced like Y. The movie doesn't talk about the girls' division, the League of German Girls, but there's a scene with one of their propaganda posters. Peter is drafted into the HJs after committing an act of juvenile delinquency, I guess you could say. We've all heard of the old-fashioned idea of sending unruly young men into the military to get them to shape up. And that's exactly what the Third Reich did in cases of juvenile delinquency. Thomas electively joins the HJ along with Peter. And Peter has more and more skepticism about Nazi propaganda as the film progresses and as he learns more about his father's anti-Nazi convictions. After the boys join the HJ, we see a very disturbing shift in Thomas's worldview. He gets more and more antagonistic toward the demographics the Nazis condemn, including disabled people, and he even gets antagonistic toward Arvid. There's a very disturbing scene I want to mention because I lived through this shit as a kid. Content warning for extreme ableism. I will hold up a card, but I encourage you to watch this part if at all possible. If I was strong enough to survive this, society can be strong enough to learn about it. Okay, so everyone's at their usual dance club and some HJs come in. Arvid starts losing his shit over everything the Nazis are doing. He says the Nazis are going after everyone and starts listing minority demographics who the Nazis wound up persecuting. And I cannot tell you how many times I went off on similar rants in the Cultiverse. And then Thomas says, and next it will be the cripples and the retards. That's who you belong with. I chose to use that language in this video and film my natural reaction so you can see how hurtful this is. I'm old enough that kids hurled those insults at me constantly. I got graphic death threats in my school desk all the time. That's a big part of why I have complex PTSD today. Bullying is abuse. End of story. Thomas deludes himself into thinking that he can adhere to the Nazi ideology but still be friends with Peter. And it very quickly becomes clear to both of them that that's not the case. And that's eerily similar to what cult survivors deal with today. Breaking free from the cultiverse and the ideology smashes the relationships with people you genuinely cared about. After you leave and break off contact with people, you're hit with the unfortunate reality that they have been brainwashed into demonizing you. I've had so many conversations with people who were close friends, and you could tell they had basically turned into robots. Some of them even had the chutzpah to tell me point blank that obeying God was more important than listening to my intuition. And they reached a point where they stopped seeing me as a human being and started seeing me as part of this evil force that they believed was in the world. I'm going to end this video with a very powerful quote from the film. If we who have a voice do not use it in outrage to cry at the treatment of our fellow human beings, we will have collaborated in their doom. I am going to take back the original meaning of turning the flag upside down. Back in the day, ships would fly national flags upside down as a signal that they were in distress. for anyone who can't see me, I'm about to show an upside down coloring sheet of the American flag. If we who have a voice do not use it to cry in outrage at the treatment of our fellow human beings, we will have collaborated in their doom. All right, thank you so much for watching. I know this was a tough one. It was tough to film. Thank you for watching. All right, guys, I'll be back soon. Bye. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor and hit the thumbs up. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon. Like you try. Bye.